was very simple to say that, oh, we find everything sacred. We worship even a plant before we pluck, like a leaf out of it. So, I mean, that has usually been my answer. But slowly I have come to realize, as Artiji's book is called, Cownomics, the holy cow, the fulcrum of the Indic civilization, right? So from that angle, I think it'll be great to explore this topic. So my first question to you, Artiji, is to explain to us, first of all, I guess, how you started writing about this. And second of all, the cow is the sacred animal for Hindus. Is that, beyond, like, we of course hold everything sacred from a multitude of gods. We have every god is associated with some animal too. So that animism is part of our culture. But is the cow a bit more sacred than other animals, and why so? So I would like you to take it away from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Richaji, for such a nice introduction to this topic. So, I'll just answer your first question first, how I started working on this. It was around 3 years ago when, I was reading a lot about the cow and, her place in society and, where she stands in Western societies and stuff. And I came across a lot of vegan books, right? Cruelty free, blah, blah, all that. And no disrespect to anybody, but I was just looking for a book which would, capture the Indic perspective, the Hindu perspective. Because, we were the first people to say, hey, the cow is sacred, no cruelty. And, the vegan movement is relatively recent, like maybe just 2-3 decades old, right? But I did not find a book where, somebody could just explain that to me, where they could tell me this is what the Vedas say, this is what the Upanishads say, this is what, Bhagavatam says. And it just started from there. I kept searching for a book and I didn't find it. So I decided to write it because I felt that a lot of people, including Hindus themselves, are very uninformed and sometimes even misinformed on the subject of not just how sacred the cow is, but what was really her place in the society. That's why I added the subheading along with the book heading, that holy cow, fulcrum of a civilization, because that is where she stood in our lives. So as I was learning more, I just figured nobody's talked about it, so might as well talk about it. And then, of course, I read like a lot of scriptures, a lot of books, and I don't know, maybe 500 research papers on every aspect of the cow and animal cruelty in general. So coming to your second question, like, why is the cow especially sacred? And we consider all beings to be sacred. Like I start the book with that in Hinduism, our whole central philosophy itself is that you are divine. Everything is divine. And the whole idea of moksha itself is that you realizing you are divine is moksha. When you realize that you are divine, that you are one more spark of that same fire, you don't need to assume any more birth. That is the idea of moksha. So we have complete freedom to worship whoever or whatever we want, and there's no ban on who or what we can worship. Now, the cow is considered sacred above and beyond all of this. And that is because the cow essentially has qualities or gunas. Guna is the right word here, which are even more, divine than the qualities that humans carry. So this is explained in the Vedas that, the cow has this quality of nurturing everyone around her, not just her children. So, even in our society, like, our generosity or our care or our nurturing is limited till, like, maybe our immediate family people. You won't go out of your way to feed somebody who may just be visiting you or something like that. But the cow is not like that. So the cow, when she is living with human beings, she considers human beings also there as her family, as her first circle or whatever. And so she has this inherent quality of nurturing all beings around her, which is one of the aspects of her sacred nature. And this is something which is described very elaborately in the Vedas. And it is explained that the Somrasa, which is considered to be the elixir of immortality for Hindus. It's again a rough English translation for those who don't know what is Somrasa. That resides in the cow in a booked way, in a sacred, secret way. And that gives her and everything she produces some utility, some great quality. So this is the second aspect of why she's considered as sacred and why she's worshipped. Now, in the ancient Hindu society, we had Vaidyashalas. Right? We had Vaidya and Vaidyashalas. So a Vaidyashala, which was like, you can roughly translate it to an original Vedic hospital or pharmacy or whatever you want to call it. It was incomplete without a cow. And even before the Vaidya started any treatment of a person, he was supposed to worship the cow. This is mentioned in our Ayurvedic literature. That the exact verses I don't have right now, but it's mentioned in the Charak Samhita that even before the Ved gives you any medicine or performs any diagnosis, he's actually supposed to have the cow in front of him. So, the extent to which the cow's just mere presence, first of all, was considered to be a blessing is described very elaborately. And especially in the case of health, see, Ayurveda was the science of life. It was not the science of disease. Ayu itself means life, right? Ayurveda means science of life, knowledge about life. So that essentially means that everything the cow produces was useful for us for our lives. And if you study actually, I don't have references from Charak Samhita and Sushil Samhita in the book because literally every second thing in that book has something from the cow. So there are so many concoctions, so many formulations, so many, soups and inhalations. Sometimes you have to inhale it, sometimes you have to apply it on your skin, sometimes you have to drink it with your milk or your soup or whatever. So there are so many formulations in Ayurvedic literature for every kind of disease, which use at least one of the five, products which the cow gives. Like the five are basically, namely milk, then gomutra, then gobar, ghee, and curd. So these are considered to be the five products which the cow gives, and together they are all five are used to create another item which is called the panchagavya. So it's not like a simple mixing together of all five. There is a proper process with mantras and chanting and some rituals which is required to be done to prepare the panchagavya. So misunderstanding that panchagavya means just throw the five together. That's not how it's prepared. The process is given very properly. It's a very detailed process. It's mentioned even in the Agamas, in the Shivagama. So, of course, in the whole book itself, in my book, I have detailed a lot about the utility of every item we get from the cow. So, this is just one aspect of it, which is Ayurveda. The second is, of course, the cow used to give gomutra and gobar, which had extensive use in agriculture. So what we call as organic farming today was just basically farming in the Vedic times. And we were a self-sustaining society just because we had so many cows and we worshipped the cows. And we used the gomutra and gobar for improving and nurturing the fertility of our agricultural land. So we all know that the Vedic civilization was an agrarian society that most people accept, at least today. But what we don't realize is that agrarian society was able to flourish because of the cow. Because if you keep farming the same land, you're actually using up the nutrients, right? And you also do need to do something about weeds and other kinds of pests. But we did not have this problem at that time because we knew how to create pesticides, organic pesticides with gomutra, and we knew how to create organic fertilizers with gobar. So whatever we do as composting and all today, they were already doing it in the Vedic times. And all of this is, of course, described in agamas and other scriptures. So the cow had so much of use for every aspect of our lives. In one of the chapters, I've described the called cow dung ash, but for Hindus, it's bhasma. We don't think too much. When you are unwell, especially for Shaivites, we generally wear the thund. And even otherwise, when you're unwell, a lot of times people tell you to apply the bhasma on your forehead. A lot of people just dismiss it as, oh, it's just a religious practice. But that bhasma actually has the capacity to detox you. It can actually absorb toxins and poisons from a surface. It's a good absorbent for heavy metals and some other chemicals also, which I don't remember right now. But so these are like some of the just some handful of things which I'm telling you, to give a summary of how useful the cow was. So basically, the point is that we were a society which was centered on the cow. As per the Vedas, repeatedly in the Vedas, it has been said that all the rishis and all the people are praying to Indra and to Devtas, please bless us with lots of cows and let all their children, all the cows be healthy, and let us be wealthy with these cows. So the cow was basically identified as a symbol of wealth. It was considered like having our idea of wealth. Even our idea of wealth was not just gold. I mean, gold was the currency or the precious metal, but a person who had lots of cows was considered a rich man, because we knew the value of the cow to our survival and to our society. And we knew that the only way for prosperity is by nurturing the cow. So many times it's mentioned in the Vedas again that we will worship the cow, we will nourish the cows, we will protect you. So there are verses where the people are praying to the cow and saying, we will protect you, you be fearless, we will protect you from all dangers, we will protect you from all, you live here fearlessly. So we are literally telling the cow to live fearlessly, and we are being gopals or gau sevaks. So that idea of gau seva was very intrinsic to our way of life there. So this is a brief answer, and all these verses, what I'm saying, it's mentioned in the book, in the economics book, in that specific instances. What I'm telling you is basically putting it all together right now in answer to the question, but they are all there in the specific chapters which I've given. And I would not say the last, but probably the most important aspect is that cow worship was a path to enlightenment. So what we understand as moksha or jivan mukti, this is given very clearly as a simple path to enlightenment itself. See, everything we are doing in life is for enlightenment at the end of the day. Whether we realize it or not, that is the ultimate goal of life. Some people read, learn, they realize, oh, that is the purpose of life. Some don't. Then you take a few more janmas and you realize, oh, life is for this. Then you start wiring your life to it. But at the end of the day, all of life is moving towards that ultimate goal, right? That is the Hindu core concept. I'm not talking some obscure thing here. That is the whole concept of Hindu dharma. Even dharma is for moksha. Dharma, Arth, moksha, which means all three are for moksha at the end of the day. So your dharma, your artha, your kama, all three should lead to moksha eventually. Now, cow worship is like a direct launch pad to that. That's what it's given in the Upanishads. So there's a story in the Chandogya Upanishad of Satyakama, who doesn't know who his father is, who doesn't know anything about his gotra, his lineage, anything. And he had immense intense seeking to realize this. Like, he was just a boy, 11, 12 years old maybe, and he goes in search of realizing the truth, finding the Brahma Vidya, as is mentioned in the Upanishads. And he meets the rishi, and the rishi basically sends him to the forest. He says, you take these lean cows. He gives him a few cows, the most leanest cows, the thinnest cows he gives to that boy, and he says, go to the forest, and when these 100 have become 1,000 or something like that, then only then you come back. You live in the forest till then. Don't come back until these cows have become healthy and have multiplied like this. So essentially, he lived for so long in the forest that he forgot he's even human. He started behaving like a cow. As in, he got that whole, the bio-memory of a cow. So how a cow behaves, sensitivity a cow has, nurturing a cow has, how she relates with nature. The cow will not go and just destroy nature, right? So he learned that whole character of a cow because he was living only with nature and only with cows, no human beings. And then well, it's shown that he's able to actually communicate or commune rather with all of nature and other animals. He developed that ability because of living with nature. And then he finally realizes one fine day that, oh, the cows have already multiplied so much. And then he goes back, and then the Rishi says that, okay, now you're ready for the ultimate initiation. And that's when the Rishi says Tattvamasi. That's the biggest Mahavakya in Hinduism, that you are that. It's the ultimate initiation for giving you enlightenment. And then that boy gets enlightened, and then he became the Rishi known as Jabala Rishi. And he has written his own Upanishad after that. So this is the one of the stories I've mentioned. There are several, but so why is the cow sacred? The cow is sacred because of all of these. It's not one reason. It's all of these reasons all together. Like I can go on giving more and more and more stories, but I think in the interest of time, I'll let you move on to the second.
No, I think this really gives us a good understanding. Yes. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I think this is a very, very beautiful understanding of just the fact how central, like you call it, the fulcrum of the civilization. And it was, and actually still is, like in Ayurveda, I have stayed in Ayurvedic, chikitsalas and, for rejuvenation therapies and all. Everything, like you said, even now, they have the same method of, preparing everything with some element of the cow, whether it's those 5 things that you mentioned, right? So we still have that. And, cow central to the economy, like, of course, we do understand that, before the industrialization, cow was central to our economy also, right? And even today, I think your book brings out a lot of those uh, current industries that depend on the cow, whether it's the milk industry, whether it's the leather industry, or, I think you bring out many of those, of course, the meat industry. So, and you call it the karmic footprint, as to, that's one of the terms that I found very interesting, that, there is something that we need to bring back. The sacredness of the cow is also the sacredness of the sustainability movement, that is sort of, right now there is a lot of lip service to it, whether it's Greta Thunberg, getting angry at us, or, there are many others who bring out this topic, but eventually we continue in the same path. But I sometimes feel that the economics, of the world can really benefit from the dharmic understanding of what you call the karmic footprint, and also to, understand how to better, create wealth, generate wealth and economics without, building that negative aspect around it. So I think I want you to delve a little bit into that as well. And do you think vegetarianism is at the core of it, or do you think, not using leather is at the core of it? Or, what are your theories on that? How we as humans also can support this process, as well as how you think the broader, if ideally, how should it look like, dharmic world?
So that's a very big question.
Oh, sorry.
Um, so see, the karmic footprint I've mentioned in the book is basically a a second metric we should be using along with the carbon footprint, which everybody uses. So, everybody talks about their carbon footprint, and corporations are now going towards being carbon neutral, and Google declared they'll be carbon neutral and all of that. But somewhere we are missing a grassroots problem here. We are missing a very fundamental problem here, which is why I introduced this so-called, I don't know if you can use it as a metric, I guess we can, but this idea of a karmic footprint. And if you really want to be prosperous, it cannot be built on others' blood and tears. It just that simple. Exploit will build long term,
Your
and
voice
they
is
know it. It's not.
breaking a bit.
Oh, okay. It might be my internet, although I haven't done anything special. But can you hear me now?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay. So yeah, I was saying that the carbon footprint is something we need to use along with the carbon footprint, because until we stop animal cruelty, we are trying to build an economy on the blood and tears of other living beings. And how on earth can we expect that to ever be successful in the long run? I mean, I'm actually surprised that somebody thought this was a good idea and that it will be successful. We are in such a terrible pandemic right now, all over the world. And as most people know, it's zoonotic. The origin of the virus is in animals. And these viruses are jumping or mutating from animals to human beings, because human beings are destroying their habitats, human beings are destroying their lives. Human beings are going and doing things to animals which would be called a holocaust if we do the same things to other human beings. What we are doing to animals is a holocaust. It's so terrible that for the few days in which I was working on those 2-3 chapters where I captured it, I actually felt sick to the stomach. I lost my appetite, even for normal food. I mean, I'm a vegetarian by birth, but I lost my appetite even for normal food. It is so sick what we do to these animals. If people really think you can become rich and healthy through those such a cruel act, then I mean you are completely disconnected from what is the purpose of life. What are you even living for? That's what I wanted to emphasize when I introduced the concept of karmic footprint. And so I'm seeing a few comments coming in. I'm just not reading the comments and questions right now. I'll look at them a bit later because I'm speaking in a flow. This is just for people who are leaving some comments. So see, the economy, at the end of the day, we are heading towards a future which will not have fossil fuels. I mean, the climatologists and all, they can argue to the end of the earth when that is going to happen, but we know it is going to happen. It is not, when it is going to happen is controversial. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, maybe okay. But that it is going to happen is not controversial. We will run out of fossil fuels at some point of time. And we have not at all given any thought to the fact that our entire food system is so heavily dependent on fossil fuels. We cannot get food without fossil fuels. We cannot. That's the reality of it. And a very big part of that, since we're talking about carbon footprint and all that, is all the fertilizers, all the pesticides, all the mechanization, all the animal agriculture. Animal agriculture itself is so heavily dependent on fossil fuels. If you have to house so many animals in one place in the CAFOs, confined enclosures, that is all going to take energy. All the cleaning, all the maintaining the temperature, all the food you feed to them, all of that is very energy intensive. So it all connects back together, and this whole food supply system itself, there is, I can't find one thing to fix in it because the whole thing is wrong. How can I tell you that, oh, reduce it, use solar panels? What solar panels? What are you going to do with solar panels?
So your voice is stuck again.
the cows who are like, captured so I don't know, but there's a lag also, I think, in my speaking.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so like I was saying that there are certain problems which are very fundamental to this animal agriculture, which cannot be fixed with superficial solutions like putting solar panels or wind energy. I mean, okay, do all of that. Nobody is stopping you. You should have been doing that 50 years ago. But you cannot fix the fundamental problems which are created by animal agriculture. There's like you need almost 230 kg or something of food, of grain, to produce 1 kg of beef. Why do you need beef when you can have like so much of food without that beef? Can you imagine? See, cows eat a lot. Okay, and whoever thought that it was even an economically viable thing to feed that poor cow so much just to kill it in the end and to produce beef was didn't even do the basic math. I mean, even if for the moment I forget about the humanity aspect of it, even as basic maths, basic economics,
So your voice is
this is
stuck.
such a resource intense water. They destroy the whole food supply itself. Like even the food which you are eating, first of all, you need to put lots of fertilizers to produce that much grain. And then that grain is fed to the cow. And then the cow itself is living in such terrible conditions. She herself is not happy. So when any living being is unhappy, we produce chemicals and toxins inside the body. Even human beings have that, right? When you have stress hormones and you have bliss hormones. So it's similar with the cow. So the cow also produces a lot of stress hormones when she's living in such terrible conditions. So obviously that animal's body has a lot of chemicals which you don't want. And we do all this stuff, oh, eat healthy, do this, get fresh air, blah blah. Why? Because we don't want to have stress hormones. But then you go and eat beef and you ingest those stress hormones secondhand. So what's the point? What's the nice thing about all your workouts and fresh air and nice hikes and all that if you're going to eat beef in the end for getting protein? That protein has just undone everything else you just did to avoid those hormones in your body and those chemicals. So, like my point is that all of these together are extremely damaging not just to the environment but to the economy and to our health and to our lives. See, the economy is something which has to be seen holistically. Now in places like California and in India, even in Colorado, I think in the US, the whole rivers are running dry. There is a water shortage. It's in the news every few weeks, I think. And there is, I think, electricity is short supply. There's a lot of these problems of a developing world which are now to be seen in the US. And these all these and this is not my opinion, by the way. There's research to prove this, that all these areas which had huge animal farms and which are extremely animal agriculture intensive, they're going dry. Water is running out in all of these places. There are places like Gulf of Mexico where they dump so much of this toxic water from these industries and toxic waste. So when you slaughter animals, it's not like Ganga Jal will come out of it. There will be a lot of waste which will be generated, and there are no laws on treatment of that waste before it's dumped into the seas and water bodies and the oceans. And there is actually like a toxic swamp there in the Gulf of Mexico, where even the aquatic life is like dying because there's not enough oxygen in the water. So like all of life is just dying because we want beef. That is how damaging it is to the whole economy. You can find out X number of ways to determine what is the economic value of that water in the Gulf of Mexico. But we all know it has value, right? You can find out what happens when this particular species dies. We can find out what happens when this particular species find out what happens when sharks die, when dolphins die. You can do all the studies. It's not like something good will happen when we go and start annihilating all these aquatic life and all these species. And when water starts running out, we know something bad happens. Yeah, of course, the scientists and ecologists can do the maths and do the studies to determine how bad, and we'll find that out. Some of it we have found out, but we know there is an economic cost to our lives term. We need to move towards a humane system where word organic itself has a lot of connotation in the US. I don't mean the American meaning of organic, because in the US we have something called organic meat also. That's not what I'm talking about. So, so it's very confusing because things mean different in different countries. So when I say organic, I mean when you use organic biofertilizer from cow dung. So the good thing about that is that it actually replenishes the fertility of the soil. Otherwise, what you do when you add these, NPK fertilizers to the soil is you're not adding back all the nutrients. You're just adding back the chemicals needed. You're not restoring the biodiversity of the soil. You're actually just adding the chemicals needed. But for nutrition, you need more than just chemicals. You need that microbiome to exist in the soil. Otherwise, it's very complex subject. Just soil is a very complex subject, so I don't want to get too much into the detail of tilling and all that. But we do know that adding biofertilizer improves the soil because it preserves the microbiome at the end of the day. Whereas if you add just chemical fertilizers and keep tilling the same soil over and over and over again, it's and in India and in US, which has gone barren. But these type of things, well, you'll never hear about them in the headlines in the newspapers. You won't hear about them because nobody cares. I mean, but we need to start caring. And loss of agricultural land is a huge economic cost. It's a very big economic cost because you cannot bring it back. Once the topsoil, that 1 inch topsoil is gone, it's gone. It will take 500 years to regenerate it back. So you have to use practices which preserve it now before it gets lost due to whatever reason. So, I mean, the whole answer will require me to talk about the whole book. But I've detailed all of this in my book in all separate chapters. There's a whole lot more to it than whatever I've just spoken.
Yes.
But
No, I've read your book,
it
I
is,
believe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've read your book, and I really think it's such a complex subject, and you've covered it so beautifully. And I would exhort everybody who is listening to this talk to purchase the book, because I mean, it will completely change your understanding of just the concept of sustainability. I have worked in this field for some time, with corporates largely on the field of sustainability, and I'm doing some research for them. But, from the angle of real non-exploitative and symbiotic living, I think the going back to the basics, it's as simple as that, right? It's going back to the basics. We cannot keep like studying, like you said, the dolphin or the shark, or how will this impact the bees of the world or something like that, right? I mean, the correlation is well known. We have to go back to the basics is probably the simple answer to this whole process. And I think in India, there has been a big movement through the zero budget farming, which is also cow centric, isn't it? And there has been many other things that I guess we can explore some of the questions that are here, from the point of view of animal husbandry. I think, of course, there are many meat eaters, whether in India or here. Non-vegetarian diets have sort of become mainstream everywhere in the world, even though veganism and vegetarianism is catching on. But like you said, if we were not so far removed from that food chain. My friend, I remember, I'm a vegetarian, I was raised like that, but when we used to go to the farm to purchase milk, and then once she bought a chicken there, like she saw the farmer cut the chicken, and after that she stopped eating meat as much as she used to. So the point is, we are so far removed from the process of how Food Inc. was that other book that or the documentary that came out, right? Food Inc., isn't it? Where the corporation. So I really want to maybe say one thing about the corporations. Do you think that the concept of um, decentralized living, or where the food is, which is a big movement in Colorado. You mentioned Colorado. There are two things that I have noticed, in Colorado. One is, like you said, the degeneration of the water bodies here. That has been huge. Like where I live, I can see there used to be a river, but we've converted into parks and golf courses. And you can see that soil, which is a riverbed still, in that area. But so that is happening a lot, and so obviously that's going to lead into, again, the whole chain of like destruction of the biodiversity, the number of birds. There have been a lot of articles on that, the reduction on the number of birds in Colorado, blah blah. But from the point of view of I think big corporations, that it becomes so mechanized. Food Inc. showed us that. If anyone hasn't seen that documentary, I think it's available on YouTube. So is there an answer from that point of view in looking at zero budget farming and decentralized living, which was at the center of, I mean, basic ancient living? Do you think that could
Right.
be solved?
So, yes. So, decentralized economy was the reason why we were able to survive in the past, because we were not so heavily dependent on other provinces, on other countries. We were kind of like a self-sustaining ecosystems. So like in one unit, if you actually read the Agama, in that Mahadeva is very beautifully described what every village or town should consist of, and that laid the foundation for our city design, our urban design, and how we lived. So even though there may be famine or there may be floods in some part of the subcontinent, the other parts did not necessarily suffer because of that. Whereas nowadays, if the states which are producing onions, the crop goes back, the whole country does not have onions. I mean, I'm not a fan of onions, but I'm just giving an example. But it's you have to import these foods. And even today, India uses 152% or something of its fertilizer production. We import fertilizers, whereas we have such a huge resource at home for producing biofertilizers, which we are not using. So we are not self-dependent. So I know that zero budget farming is a good concept, and I think people, at least in South, are moving towards it and they are practicing towards it. But there is still a lot to be done, because even zero budget farming is only looking at farming at the end of the day. It's not looking holistically at removing animal cruelty also from the equation. Because when you see, you have to go from the humane angle. Starting beginning point needs to be from the humane angle. There is a parallel lobby right now which is very happy to breed cows at an insane rate. Breed cows as much as you can, like let India become a top producer and exporter of milk. No, we don't want that. That is extremely suicidal at this point if we start doing that. Like we have such a huge stray cow problem in India. Nobody is solving that. So how can you do zero budget farming without solving these fundamental problems? And we think this is just a problem of Delhi or UP. It's not. You have the same problem in southern states also if you don't rein in on this phenomena, basically. So zero budget farming is a good concept, but it has to be done with that angle of humanity also, not as just one more method of increasing production. See, increasing production, there's nothing wrong with increasing production, but that increase of production should not be at the cost of animals. That's what I'm trying to say. And the literature on this is very blurry. I have not found any proper details of what is their approach to this. Are they also doing this to increase milk production and leather production? I don't know, because Tamil Nadu is a very big exporter of leather. So if you multiply a lot of cows, that's basically that becomes leather. So I don't know exactly what is the whole complete picture of the proposal, because it may be good. I'm not saying it's bad. Because I just don't have proper information on it. I'm not assuming that information is not available. So I cannot comment on it. If they are doing it with this angle of reducing the dependency on milk, then it's not. Because the push in India is towards increasing production of milk and towards increasing production of beef and leather, because they are an easy source of revenue. So just moving towards organic farming is not sufficient, is what I'm trying to say, because that could one of the side effects of that could be a push towards increasing production of milk and beef, which we don't want. So one country has done this right, which is Bhutan. In
Bhutan.
Bhutan, they actually have a decentralized system, and the country has gone completely organic. I mean, their goal was 2020, but I think they have already gone organic. I see, the media does not cover these kind of stories properly. I
Yes.
searched and searched on recent news of Bhutan, and um, the famous, all the proper literature is just, oh, Bhutan will have a proper loss in GDP. They don't even have any. Their projections are like, oh, they're going to lose out on GDP, whereas they may not, because organic farming it has a certain phase, like a transition phase when you move towards organic farming. It's not that you can suddenly have the same yields, because the yields you were having earlier were basically just chemicals driven, whereas now you're actually nourishing the soil. So initially, for at least 5 to 10 years, the yields may not be that high, but the yields can actually exceed the yields from inorganic farming. When you move to Bhutan will have to lose out on its GDP or the production or whatever. It's actually getting a lot of hate, and I don't know why. They're all like, oh, Bhutan's forests are intact, they should use it. I'm like, oh, hello, what's the problem with that? You guys criticize countries which are having deforestation problems so much. Then why are you having a problem with a country which has kept its forests intact? Like, you should be like falling at their feet and trying to learn from them. They have been able to preserve their forests, something which so many countries have failed at. But the media is like, oh, World Bank. There was this thing, some report by World Bank. I mean, I think that's a very misguided take on Bhutan. But the main thing is that Bhutan has been able to move towards this, and this is how they have done it, by the decentralized practices, where literally every farmer or every farmer within a radius of 5 kilometers or something, they have cows, and they use the gobar to generate organic fertilizer, and they use that to keep the soil to you know going, and then they use gomut as pesticides, and that has actually helped them get some very good yields. There is an article on that which I have referenced in my book as well. Um, but you can go and read that if you like. It's a nice. Of course, the media wanted to probably demonize them, but the person, the scientist who actually helped them create this whole system, he was very intelligent, and he's answered those questions very intelligently. So let me see if I can find it right now. I'll share it in the chat. You can read that.
Yeah, that'd be
So
wonderful. You can share the link. And I think Bhutan,
uh,
when you mentioned Bhutan, I remember seeing a TED talk on that where, they said that it's carbon negative now. And Sikkim also has tried the organic
yeah,
farming route, 100% organic farming. And of course, like you said, there are some challenges to it. And, the big corporation concept or the, large or monocrop farming, all of these things have sort of, with the industrialized countries or industrial revolution, that domination of corporations really has driven a lot of these issues. And what I find most interesting is most of the time, there was this big movement called the Eco-Feminism Movement, right? So it is the women that have been central to a lot of these uh, eye-opening moments, like Rachel Carson in the United States. She wrote the first book when the country was going hurrah over the whole industrialization concept. She brought out the horrors of what's happening to the environment at that time. And in India, we have Vandana Shiva. I know she works closely with the Art of Living group, and again, they use a lot of this natural fertilizers based on gomutra, and create organic farming processes around the country. So of course, um, you know, wherever we've seen big corporation, to me, I feel like, there have been women who've stood up, whether it's in Kerala where, Coca-Cola or PepsiCo, they had a big fight and the women stood up. So, I mean, I want you to sort of weigh in on that and your perspective on, like, what do you think about the fact that, because the economics have become so much male driven and so much profit orientated, that it is going to be very, very difficult to turn back the clock or turn back the processes. And how is it even possible to bring back at least our dharmic civilization, our Indian civilization, aware of these aspects, that we can actually have a more sustainable, dharmic, and more eco-friendly lifestyle, which can, without compromising on the ease of living, right? I think that it may be a very difficult, question, because I think it's sort of out of the purview. But I just feel like, what are maybe a couple of things that we can do as consumers and as maybe producers also. Sometimes, there are people who just give up their corporate life, go into farming. I know lots of people like that who have gone back to India to open up their own farms. But what do you think? What can we do even as we go on in our daily lives?
Right. So by the way, I've just posted the link on the Zoom chat, and you can post on Facebook as well if you like. The link which I was talking about Bhutan.
Oh,
So
great.
about how we can move towards this lifestyle. First of all, ban beef. That's number one. That's like something every country should do. Like for India, a cow is sacred to us, so it's even more important. But literally, there is no good reason to even have beef. Out of all the meats, which we produce, for any beverage produces, beef is the most damaging. To pressure this movement, I think first of people need to stop eating beef. So that's the first thing which everybody can do with very minimal inconvenience. It's you just have to eat something else. It's not that you can't live without it, right? I mean, why should some animal have to first of all die for you to just eat something because you like it, not because you need it? We don't need beef in our daily lives or anything, for protein, for nutrition, for health, even yeah. So if you're eating beef, it's purely because you want to, not because you have to. So that distinction needs to be made whenever it comes to anything which comes from cruelty. Do you have to, or do you just want to? So if you're dying on your deathbed and you have to take some medicine, then it's a different thing. Okay, fine, you have to. But you have like thousands of other things to eat. You don't need to eat beef to survive, right? I mean, you're not living in caves anyway. So this is the first thing everybody can do, which is within the reach of everyone, literally. I don't know of a single person on this planet who needs that beef more than the cow needed her own life. Right? It's not necessary. So that's the first thing everybody can do. The second thing we can do is we can find humane goshalas and farms, small farms, which are actually nurturing the cow and which are looking after the cows, which are not depriving the calf of milk. And we take milk only from them, not from the big dairy industrialists. So because the milk in the market, at least in India, is just adulterated. It's not even that it's good or bad or healthy or unhealthy, whatever. It's adulterated milk. That's why it's cheap. If you actually buy pure cow milk from a goshala, it will cost you at least 20, 30 rupees more, because it's not adulterated, because it is actual milk. But what you get in the market from the big brands, it is adulterated milk. That's why it's cheap. So the biggest challenge I have seen goshalas and humane farms face is that people don't want to pay extra for the milk. And that's the little bit of a challenge I've seen everywhere, that people don't want to move towards that milk because it's more expensive. They don't realize that I'm paying less for something which is probably going to harm you. So that is the second thing everybody can do. I know in the US it's not so easy because there are relatively much fewer goshalas, farms, etc. So it's more difficult for you. But in India, you can do that. You can find goshalas in small farms, which do. Working on compiling a list of this type of goshalas everywhere on my website, economics.com. I'm working on it. So maybe in a few weeks, I'll be able to update that on the website. So, if somebody wants to find which are the goshalas near you, anywhere, it'll be a working list. We'll keep updating from time to time. Or if I'll update that list on my website. Even otherwise, make some efforts, try to find, if you just do a few Google searches, the rest, the Facebook and Instagram ads will do their bit. They will show you all the right ads for what you're looking for.
Absolutely. Algorithms zindabad. It's like, it really helps.
Already catch up. That's what I figured. That's how I found it out. So, so this is the other thing we can all do. And if you want to actually make a complete shift, I have given the economics model in the book for how we can create these sustainable units. So I've called the economics model as one unit. One, like you have this concept, right? The smallest indivisible unit, which functions as a whole, something like that, like how the cell is in the body. So something like that. The economics model which I've given includes like 7, 8 components in it, which is Goshala, then there's farm, agricultural land, then the Vedishala, then certain components for renewable energy and rainwater harvesting, and there's a biodigester for creating biogas and biofertilizer, which only has a one-time installation cost. It does not really have any other running cost. So you can make your own cooking gas, your own fertilizer in your own backyard. So that itself decentralizes the whole thing, because a lot of these things, transportation cost is higher than the cost of manufacturing. So if you can actually just manufacture your own fertilizer, then you're sorted. You're saving so much on just the fertilizer cost. The fertilizer can be expensive. So these are just I've explained it in a bit more detail in the book. But like you were saying, there are certain things that you can all do. You can all move away from leather. You can all move. There's nothing in leather which comes from animals which you can't get in vegan leather or synthetic leather. I recently bought this wallet made of cork. It's vegan leather made of cork, and it's actually much more beautiful than leather which comes from animals. So and it's not even just about centralized and not centralized. The cost of that leather leather is born by developing countries. So much of the leather which a lot of Western countries use, it comes from India and Bangladesh and Pakistan. I don't have any hopes from Pakistan, but at least India and Bangladesh can definitely move away from that, really cruel industry. So the cost of that leather gets externalized, right? Somebody sitting in Italy using a handbag made in the tanneries of Kanpur does not see what damage that handbag has caused, right? Because the entire cost, environmental cost, human cost, health cost, everything is externalized. You just see a fancy handbag in your hand. You don't even care where it comes from. And at some, I mean, we all need to wake up at some point or the other. Like, yeah, I mean, I realized that it's a cruel industry maybe 12 years ago. So some people may be realizing it only now. But there's always a starting point. Just because you live a certain way doesn't mean you have to stick to it. You can always change your ways. And it is very doable. So there's one thing which this guy who made Bhutan sustainable, he said that, see, it's not a cosmetic solution. There's a very deep spirituality to it. You have to have that spiritual context when you are doing this shift. And I think I'm completely in agreement with him, because this Western mindset of just shifting from one thing to the other does not work, because it's at the end of the day, it's a cosmetic solution. You have to take a more spiritual understanding of it in the first place, so you can change your ways and make it more sustainable. So when you take that kind of a context, you obviously come up with, your own inner intelligence will tell you this is right and this is wrong. Whereas if you just look at cosmetic solutions, oh, we need to reduce carbon footprint, then okay, instead of normal tube light, you will have something from a solar panel. But you will still not change things like beef, for which you are not directly contributing to the carbon footprint, but it is contributing to the carbon footprint somewhere else, right? That's why this whole concept of going carbon neutral doesn't even make a lot of sense, because you're only seeing the direct contribution of one establishment or corporation, even to global warming. You're not seeing the externalized costs, externalized contributions. So I don't know if I answered you appropriately, but I guess that's how I would
No,
answer it.
that's fantastic. I think you gave us so many tips. First of all, you said ban beef. I mean, in any which way, we, from our own personal side, we can try to change our lifestyles and make sure we make other people aware, because a dharmic lifestyle is directly correlated to a sustainable lifestyle. Like you said, the Western models where there is always a cookie cutter or a band-aid approach, fix this and put a band-aid here, put a band-aid there. That's never going to work. It has to be a holistic understanding, and definitely go back into our conscience, our atma, and churn. It's a spiritual thought, like you said, like the Bhutan experiment is a spiritual process. I guess we will take some questions from the audience. You can raise hand or just let me know. There is one very, I think, important question. We cannot let go of this topic, while we are on the concept topic of cow and cow as the mother. But someone here asked the question that there are people who use cow piss drinkers as a gali, as a sort of curse word sort of towards Hindus. So, is this something that we can address on this panel? Suraj Dara is asking from Ireland as to what do you think of that? And also, actually, there is one person who has written here that NIH here in the United States has actually patented cow urine. So I think there is part of the answer is right there that the value of Galmutra. But maybe you should weigh in.
At least we're not eating corpses. We're not eating dead animals. When we are eating something which is scientifically proven as good for our health, it's not just one patent. there are several patents and they are owned by Indians. The patent is an international patent, so that's why it's through whichever agency they might have been able to get it through. But it's not owned by US. Patent is owned by Indians. And there are several patents on cow urine, even for medicinal as well as pesticide use. So we are doing this, and there are several research papers. I've cited some of those in my book also, which have actually shown that this cow urine concentrate and its other derivatives, they have a lot of therapeutic effect in fatal diseases like cancer. So there is a research institute, I think in Manisar. I think it's in Manisar. There is one in Indore. All these research institutes. See, we are doing our indic work. We are doing our job. We are healing people. But a lot of this research does not get accepted, does not get published in Western research outlets, in Western journals. And yes, somewhere we are also a little bit on the on the back foot. We have not maybe been so articulate in terms of pitching our research to these journals, and there is also a bias. Let's not ignore that part. There is definitely a bias in terms of supporting research on this. So all things considered, just because we may not have as much research on it, like as is something else they found, doesn't mean it's not working. We have studies where these people did this experiment on fatal cancer patients, like as in these are patients who are coming from very economically weak backgrounds who did not have money to do chemotherapy, because chemotherapy goes on for years sometimes. And they were like, the doctors told them that you don't have much time, whatever. Like, they were like the type of cases which were doomed, so to say, right? Now, and these Ayurvedic centers, they actually got a group of these patients, and so because you see, these people had nothing to lose in taking this therapy. Now, you and I and the people who make jibes about Gaumutra drinkers and all that, they have the prestige to preserve, and they care a lot about the social status. But when you're ready to die, you will drink Gaumutra. That's It's that simple. Even if those people who are cracking jokes tomorrow, if they are dying and they discover only Gaumutra can save them, even they will drink it. This is how life works. Now, these people were basically taken as a research group, and there was, of course, also a control group who were given the Gomutra medicines, and they took the treatment, and many of them actually got healed. They were healed of the terminal patients with cancer who were healed, and almost all the others showed such a huge improvement without any chemotherapy. There is also a book, The Holy Cancer, How a Cow Saved My Life, by this guy, what's his name? Malviya, Amit Malviya something. So he's also talked about the same thing, how he got cancer, and he was somewhere outside India, and he had, I think, already lost some other family members to cancer, and then he got it, and then he finally left his life there and he moved to India, and he took treatment in some similar Ayurvedic center, and he was finally healed of cancer. So in the end, he puts a disclaimer that, okay, yeah, it was not just the cow, it was also the food, the air, the soil. Of course, so it's the whole ecosystem he's talking about. He's put a very nice disclaimer later on after writing a big book on it. So, because some people were asking him, blah, blah, blah. Okay, putting all that aside, he has eventually written a book on how that Gomutra based medicine saved his life, basically. So, that's why now he started a new foundation, the Healing Ved, where they go around educating people on it. So he's not being a doctor or anything, but he tries to inform people about how this Indic lifestyle can actually help you. So there is enough evidence if you try to look for it. If you just want to make jokes on Hindus, then sky's the limit. You can make jokes on everything. So and like I said, even these people may make jokes on us, but tomorrow if they are dying, they will still take the medicine. So, like Prince Charles was cured of coronavirus with some Ayurvedic medicine. So, you can make all the fun you want of our culture, but at the end of the day, when the day you are dying, everything is fine. Then that day you also all become Jai Shri Ram. So, it's not about an ideology, it's a science. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm just doing it just because of ideology, it's different. This is a science, and we have lived that science. We are living, breathing examples of that science. Just research, publishing a research paper alone is not science. You surviving it, taking that medicine is science. That means it works, right? You try 10 things, 15 things, something does not work, and you take the 16th thing and it works, means it's your experiential thing, right? So this is somewhere, some place where we tend to, always go back to patterns and all that. And yes, we should, definitely should. We need more of those patterns. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm just saying that, it's not that, it's just science only if Lancet publishes it. Well, hats off to Lancet if they do publish it, but just because they have not does not mean it's not science. That's what I'm trying to say. So the West does not own the copyright to science. We have lived that science and we have survived with that science. And a little bit of history to this, since we are anyways talking about this subject. This hatred for the cow and our worship of the cow is actually very, 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 very old. It's not something new. New York Times has been, on the one hand, New York Times supports veganism, like, and they will write stories on cow cuddling and blah blah blah. But on the other hand, they'll be like, oh, these Hindus are saving cows, and now you can expect a cow everywhere, and there are cows on the streets, and whatever. So they are absolutely hypocritical. Like, if they support animal rights, then we are the torch bearers in that. We are the first people to say, hey, we need to worship this animal instead of eating it. So you should be falling at our feet for that. But no, they are actually not interested in actual animal rights. So there's a lot of hypocrisy, and I don't mean New York Times now. I mean from 100 years ago. Even 100 years ago, there are articles even today on New York Times website where they have mocked Hindus left, right, and center for their cow worship. So, but the history is even older than that. The Gaumutra jibe comes from this whole cow protection movement in India in the 18th and 19th century. And it was actually this one issue of cow protection which literally united the people of the whole country across economic divides. So the rich, the learned, the poor, the farmers, the merchants, everybody was able to rally behind this one cause of cow movement, of cow protection. And that is one thing. There were the Go Bahini Samhiti, I think, and there were several of these organizations which came up with the patronage of Dayanand Saraswati and the Maharaja of Benares. And I've explained all this in much more detail in my book. They came together to create these, uh, in the modern language, you can say meetups, but these kind of like gatherings of people informing them, and they canvassed a lot against the British. They did not allow the British to buy cows many times. It thwarted them wherever they were going for their rallies. The Hindus went there and they started their protests against cow slaughter. So it's a very important movement which has been completely buried by historians, so-called historians. But the British knew this, and the British have documented this, and they have recorded this. This whole quote, there's a very long quote which is there in my book, where he says that, uh, this one cow protection can send us back, packing our bags. And so we need to make sure that this does not go out of control. And they compared it with the Irish Revolution and all that, and they said that the 1857 mutiny, they did not succeed because they were not organized, they were not well coordinated. But this cow protection movement is actually fixing that problem. They are getting more and more organized. They have bypassed our laws. So the Hindus of that time were so smart. They actually found loopholes in their laws, and the British have accepted it in their letters. There's nothing we can do to stop them because they are not technically breaking the law. And it's actually very heartening to read these accounts because we only get a very sad version of our own history. Oh, Hindus are stupid. Hindu kings are stupid. They were like, there's always this snide way of always attacking our ancestors, but we don't actually know our real history. They were so smart, those sannyasis and those Hindu organizations, Hindu leaders, they were so smart. They actually went around organizing these gatherings, and the British officials have said there's nothing we can do to stop them. Because if we do something to stop them, we may have another tragedy on our hands and it will spiral out of control. So that's why they tried to fan this Hindu-Muslim divides more by allowing Muslims to slaughter cows, so that the blame is not falling directly on them, but at the same time making sure that the Hindus are not becoming too powerful. There's somebody to check their power, and this is there documented in the words of Queen Victoria herself, and that quote is also I mentioned it in my book. So this history of cow hatred is very old, and this hatred comes from there, where they try to basically, build this whole global narrative of how backward we are and how we are almost like savages or something and how stupid. But actually, it is because they were scared of the might of Hindus and the love of the cow. So the Gaumutra jibes which we hear even today, that is the original history of it. And that narrative has just lived on because that's how the West controls all narratives, basically.
Right. No, that's so it's a very wonderful answer, and it goes back to the politics of divide and rule of the British. Is and I've read that chapter. That's one of the most interesting chapters. But just because I'm a history buff, but I want to exhort everyone here. People here are so passionate. Thank you so much for all your comments. I'm going to at least save them and maybe put them together in some sort of an article and paste it. Paste it on our Facebook page. But one thing that I want to say is please buy the book. We are not the, Audrey Trishki may be getting $1 million for writing good things about Aurangzeb. And, there may be this other, what is her name? Isabel Wilkerson, who gets money for her caste book and, becomes an instant bestseller. But for, again, narrating all those lies. But here we write out of our passion. Arti ji, thank you so much for writing this wonderful, wonderful book to bring us back to the core of what our civilization, is, and to be able to probably give answers, when we are asked about ourselves. Because like you said, everything has been controlled by the leftists or other people writing about us. So this is wonderful that you have written, and I think one great way to contribute is to buy the book. And also Arti runs a website called hindugenocide.com, where again funds are always needed. So I would really, really appreciate if all of you can sort of keep that in mind and donate whatever you can. But other than that, I think Anish had a question. I know you have pasted it here too, but would you like to ask it? We will open it up for questions for the next 10-15 minutes. So Anish has a question. I think he's already posted it here. So I'm going to ask it. There are arguments made to the effect that meat is a low cost and accessible source of protein for the poor. What do you say to them?
Well, the poor are not eating meat. It's the rich who are eating meat. So I'm not sure where
US,
this
I think the one thing that I'll say is that in the US, just because the meat industry is so,
they're subsidizing it.
It's
so
economies of
US,
scale and
yeah.
subsidies, correct.
In the US, I think you have something like a 1% development cess or some bullshit like that. I don't want to use the word bullshit. Actually, I'm trying to move away from it because bullshit is sacred to us. So some crap like that they have. It's all very detailed in this book called Meatonomics. If you have seen that book, you can get that book if you're really intrigued by that subject. In that book, that guy, he's a lawyer, he's not an economist, but he has actually dug out all the nefarious things the meat industry does in the US. It's a very big lobby. So what they do is they charge 1% on the sales of meat, and that 1% is basically a huge amount, and that huge amount is used just to promote meat for all the adverts and all the so-called crappy research they produce on how great the meat is. And there's a parallel lobby whose only purpose is just to prove that all the research that shows that meat is bad for you is false. So when I was searching for research papers to show how meat is actually bad for you, I kept coming across a lot of research which is trying to disprove that research, and their methods are very flimsy. Like they'll take a sample size of 50 people or something. There's a research there which has thousands of people in it, which has been done for 3-4 years, and they are showing this. But no, that new funded research of 50 people is what you're supposed to believe or something. So there is all this funding comes from these kind of things, and because it is subsidized a lot in the US. Um, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the overall global studies basically show that it's the rich who are eating meat. As the poor countries like India and China are getting richer, people are moving towards increased consumption of meat. Whereas in the West, people are reducing the consumption of meat. So it's more of a status symbol for the rich people actually. If you see a global perspective, in the US, maybe I'm not sure of exactly the comparison, but even in the US, even if you go with that argument, you can still eat vegan meat, plant-based meat, if that's what you want to eat. So I think plant-based meat is not as expensive as other things. The lab-grown meat is like extremely expensive right now, but I think the plant-based options are getting more and more viable. And I mean, I know this is again a Western fad that you need it to look and feel like meat, but it has so many plant-based options even otherwise, which are not so expensive. So there is literally no argument which supports that. Also, the West actually eats much more protein than they need, which is bad for health. So their consumption is like way above the recommended levels, and they're actually consuming much more protein than is needed for the body, and it is really bad for health. And I've again explained this in the chapter dedicated to food, which is What You Eat Is Eating You. There's a chapter in my book. In that, I've explained this whole lopsided, upside down mechanism of how people eat in Western countries. So I think that's the answer for that question.
Right. No, that's great to hear. And also in the United States, I mean, we, first of all, in the United States, we consume 50% of the pharmaceuticals of the world. We have probably like 5 or 6% of the population. But the point is that, we also have almost every family in the United States has cancer in their family. And it's directly linked to some of the chemicalized meat that is being consumed here, because storage processes and the process of just how it's manufactured in these big plants is creating that problem. People are realizing it, and that is why, like you said, more people here are going towards veganism, vegetarianism, and it's become a cool fad here actually, even though people still love their steak. But I think we've had just fantastic comments in the comment box. I will make sure to copy them and post them on our Facebook page. But I think this was a wonderful discussion. I also want to thank Raji Vermaji for hosting us and making this possible. And Arti ji, this was like wonderful. Do you want to make any last comments? I think before we close the show, I think the audience questions, we've been able to address all of them. So that's great. But
Okay.
thank you so much for a
So
wonderful, passionate session. Mhm.
I've developed my book mainly
Yes.
because I'm not going to get rich by your buying the book, but there is for us to make a shift, people need to know these things. It's a lot of knowledge and facts which people need to be armed with. Like you were saying, I'm not institutionally funded. I'm doing this in my spare time. I actually have a full-time job. So by your buying the book, it will first of all help the book, rank up. That is one. And second, you need to be able to answer these questions yourselves, which you're asking me. So if you read the book, it will at least introduce you in a very brief way to all of these topics. And then, of course, there's a lot you can learn on your own from there. So that's the main thing I would want to say. And apart from that, if there is any
Absolutely.
other
Buy the
question
book
you
and
have,
gift
you
it.
can ask. Yes, go to wherever.
Right.
I'll try to make short videos to answer people's questions as we go forward, and I'll be answering some of these questions on the website also, calnomics.com. So, like, I'm answering them verbally, but sometimes I may want to just also add some reference links and put it together in a decent way. So, I'll be posting new articles there which answer all of these questions around this topic. So, you can check that out. And yeah, the website is
Fantastic.
cownomics.com. Somebody's asking.
Mhm. Cownomics.com. Okay, great. This is great. Please buy the book, gift it to your friends in India. I think we have it available on Kindle in the United States.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a hard copy. Is it possible to get a hard
It's
copy?
available in hard copy as well as Kindle all over the world. So you can buy it
Oh,
on
great.
Amazon. You can buy it on Barnes and Noble. You can buy it on Bookshop. It's available everywhere. The in a few months it will be available as ebook also everywhere. There is some condition of Amazon that I can't put up the ebook anywhere else until for the first 3 months or something. So you can get it on Kindle Kindle Unlimited as well as an ebook to buy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Artiji. Thank you for, I know it's pretty late out there where you are in India. So thank you for, staying up so late for us. And thank you
Thank
everyone
you
for
for hosting me.
participating. Yeah, absolutely. And buy the book. And thank you so much for all your passionate comments. I know people who have attended this session are obviously very, very keyed into this topic. So this is great, great participation. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Namaste.